Wow, London, look at you. What an incredible pleasure to be here tonight. It's so great not just to see so many people out, but so many people out to engage in our democracy, to be part of asking questions, sharing concerns, challenging and offering suggestions, and being part of the kind of active citizenship that we need more of in our democracy. We're used to tweeting and engaging and posting on Facebook and sharing our stories with our friends, and that's great, but we're also used to talking with our neighbors, talking with our friends about issues that matter to us, contributing to shaping our communities, and this is a part of that. This is a part of holding your governments to account for you. But it's also something really important for me, too. It's a chance to check in, see how we're doing, find out what's on your minds, find out where your concerns are, explain some of our thinking and our approach on issues that matter to you, and figure out together ways we can move forward. Now, I won't have all the answers to everything you ask and in the way you want to hear them, I'm sure. But I do promise that I'll take your concerns seriously and think hard about how we're going to work forward together in terms of continuing to build the best possible country that we can have, that we continue to be so proud of. You know, over the past couple of days, I've been traveling through Ontario, meeting with people in coffee shops and restaurants, and also a handful of town halls like this. And one of the things that I did actually just this afternoon, I wanted to particularly share with you. I got a chance to sit down with a group of 10 kids from La Loche, Saskatchewan. Now, La Loche was the place a year ago this month that suffered a terrible tragedy in a young person who took the lives of some of his friends and then went to his school and caused some more tragedy. And the community was reeling, obviously, when I went to visit them the following weeks. And to sit with those young people today and talk about how they're dealing with it, how they're looking for more support, how they're developing resilience to deal with not just the challenges of being a teenager, but going through tremendously difficult circumstances and difficulties on top of the challenges that happen too often in our northern and remote communities was really something particular. And I talked to one of the young men for a little longer, and his name was Jeremiah, and I asked Jeremiah, I mentioned that I was out talking with Canadians and a lot of non-Indigenous Canadians, and did he want me to bring a message to all of you, to Canadians, about how the kids in La Loche are doing and what they want and what they have to say. And I don't usually do this, but I did take notes because I wanted to get it right. So Jeremiah said, first of all, that he wants to be loud and proud to be Dena Suklina, proud of his community. He dreams big. And he doesn't want to disappear. He doesn't want to be forgotten. And I thought that was particular. So I asked him, well, what do you mean you don't want to be forgotten or disappear? He says, I want to make sure that my language, that my culture, my identity is passed on. He was a Dene speaker, but he recognized that kids younger than him weren't getting as much support in their language. And for him, he knew that language and identity is wrapped up in your sense of self, your sense of worth, and your ability to overcome the challenges that you are facing. And it was a message of hope and inspiration from someone and a community that's been through tremendously dark times. And he said, thank you for the things that you're doing. There's a lot more to do. And I said, yes, I know that, but we continue to be with you. And he said, actually, Prime Minister, there is one more thing. If you're going to be in front of the national media and talking to people, could you say one more thing for me? I said, absolutely, anything. He said, okay. And then I realized that he was a grade 12 boy. I said, there's this girl. Her name is Shaylee Piche. And I'm supposed to give her a shout out from Jeremiah, from his brother David, who's going through a difficult time, and from the whole Janvier Mercredi family. So Shaylee, Jeremiah is thinking of you. The stories that we hear when we talk with each other, when we remember that through tragedy, through challenges, we learn from each other, we draw on each other, we grow, we challenge each other, we think about the issues that define us and other issues that we choose to not let define us. And ultimately, coming together in rooms like this, in church basements and mosques and community centers across the country, the way we talk with our neighbors in the street, the way we come together to pick who gets to serve us in municipal, provincial, and federal elections, is an expression of who we are as a people. And the more we can be open, honest, together in respectful conversation, the better we're going to be ultimately. And I am incredibly moved and touched by how many people came out tonight. Frustrated as I know a few people are that there are lots more people outside who couldn't get in, but I know that this is a sign that we have a democracy that is healthy, that is open, and that always is ready to see full participation by its citizens. So thank you for being here, and with that, I'm going to start taking some questions. How about a question from in here? You, sir, with the mustache. Yes, go ahead. Get the mic into him.
Hello, Justin.
Hello.
My name is Zach. I am 21 years old, and I'm here today to speak on behalf of the silent majority in this country. When you were running for the office of Prime Minister, your party said that Canada would run modest $10 billion deficits until the end of your term. Then the budget would become balanced. 1 year later, that is clearly no longer the case. In the most recent update of long-term economic and fiscal projections released by the Department of Finance, it is predicted that under your government, we will run deficits every year until 2055, and we will have an enormous $1.5 trillion in debt. $1.5 trillion. That is totally unacceptable. To give some people some perspective, in the final year of our previous government, that very same fiscal report projected we would have a $160 billion surplus by the year 2040. Justin, what are you doing to this country? You are intentionally setting up millions of young Canadians like myself for complete and utter failure. And what? And for what? To pander to your own moral superiority complex? If you care about young Canadians and the future of this country, you need to stop what you are doing right now.
No, please, please. Hey, everyone, this is an open town hall, if you needed proof. And we'll let Zach finish his question, please.
My question is this. What, if anything, are you going to do to curb your insane and reckless spending habits, which are on the verge of being criminal, to make sure that we do not end up being $1.5 trillion in debt, as your government predicts?
Okay. Thank you. Now, in the last election, three parties were in significant contention for earning the trust to govern this country. Two of them made the decision that they were going to balance the books at all costs. One party, my party, took the decision, recognized that what this country needed was investment in our infrastructure, in the middle class. We needed to help people get ahead because, quite frankly, under the previous government, we'd had the worst record on growth since R.B. Bennett in the depths of the Great Depression. We needed to face down the challenge that we're seeing all around the world right now of a middle class that doesn't feel like success is within their grasp anymore. It doesn't feel that the story of progress that has written the story of this country from one generation to the next is actually working for them because people aren't of the opinion that their kids are automatically, even however hard they work, going to be able to have a better quality of life or more opportunities than they did. There are real anxieties and doubts out there. And we're seeing that not just in Canada, but around the world, where people are fearful and they're leaning towards closing in, closing off, pointing fingers, laying blame. And we took a chance in the last election. We said, you know what? We think Canadians are better than that. And we're not going to play the politics of fear and division. And we're going to be upfront with Canadians that what we think we need is investment. We need to invest in public transit. We need to invest in social infrastructure. We need to invest in green infrastructure. We need to invest in our universities and colleges and research institutions. We need to invest in our young people. We need to invest in the middle class and those working hard to join. And the first thing we did was we lowered taxes on the middle class and raised them on the wealthiest 1%. And I'm making a jump here, Zach, but I assume that the people you voted for, the Conservatives, voted against that particular measure to raise taxes on the wealthiest 1% and lower them on the middle class. And then, this past summer, we brought in the Canada Child Benefit, which helps 9 out of 10 families in this country with more money, tax-free, every month for the costs of groceries, school supplies, raising their kids. And the reason we can do that is we're giving more money to the people who need it, those in the middle class and those working hard to join it, by doing less for the wealthy families that received the child benefit under the previous government. These are decisions we made because we know that giving opportunities to everyone to succeed, that supporting the middle class and those working hard to join it is the way we build the future. So when I talk to Canadians about being optimistic about our future, about investing in the kinds of things that we know are going to lead to good jobs for our kids and secure retirements for ourselves and our parents, that are going to lead to better investments in research and innovation, that are going to lead to solutions, better health care, better outcomes in education. These are the kinds of things that we talked about in the last election. And we, in the Liberal Party and the Government of Canada, have been consistent that our focus is in investing in ways to grow the middle class and help Canadians move forward, and I stand by that. Thank you, Zach. Next question. You, sir, in the white T-shirt. Yes.
Thanks for taking my question, Mr. Prime Minister. And I do need to say, my fellow Londoners, as a young person who has felt politically disenfranchised, to see this turnout is incredibly just great to see. And thank you, especially my young peers that I see here from my classes as well as the campus at large. My question is about the murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. Thank you, personally thank you, for your commitment to launching an investigation. However, I don't feel that I've seen as much concrete progress in that area as I would like, and I wonder if there's anything specific that you can tell me that would alleviate those concerns. Thank you.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you for your question. And before I get to that specifically, I do want to say that if our government was able to put forward ambitious commitments in the platform and then start to deliver on them, $8.4 billion towards Indigenous communities in our first budget over the coming years, it's because we recognize that Canadians, non-Indigenous Canadians, have been asking for this, that everyone understands that reconciliation isn't just about government and Indigenous peoples, it's about all Canadians coming together to fix something that has gone wrong, mistakes that have been made, and neglect that has happened over generations and centuries. So I want to thank you and everyone for understanding that this is something that we need to work on together. In terms of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, I feel extraordinarily strong about this. As I've said many times, we and many parties in the House have been calling for a long time for a national public inquiry, and we've committed to that. Immediately after getting elected, we sent out our Indigenous Affairs Minister, Carolyn Bennett, and a number of others to do a pre-inquiry to set up the terms of what we were going to do, to make sure that we involved the families, the communities, the various groups that had been advocating and engaged in this issue for so long, to make sure that they helped shape the inquiry. This past summer we named the commissioners, and they are right now going through the significant amounts of work that have been done by various groups, by provinces, by various organizations to make sure that we're not starting from zero. Because over the past years, even though there wasn't a national inquiry, there was an awful lot of work, good work, done on this essential issue. So they're going through and collating everything that's been done so that when they start in a few months, their public hearings and their engagement, they will be able to move forward quickly and significantly, and most importantly, in the right way that respects and folds in everything that's done. Like you, I'm impatient to get healing for the families, to get justice for the victims, and to put an end to this. And there's lots of things we're doing on top of that, like funding shelters. We don't need to wait for the report to know some things we can do. But we need to make sure that this inquiry that has taken, decades longer than it should have, gets done right as we get it going. Thank you. Okay, question here. You in the front row. There you go.
I just want to say thank you so much for coming here and speaking to us. So I have struggled a lot with mental health in the healthcare system. Getting real help in a timely manner is absolutely essential to saving lives. How can we get a more adequate and rigorous mental health treatment that is more than just a one-time service, is available when patients are in crisis, and covered by government funding?
Thank you. Thank you for the question, but more than that, thank you for standing up and being so brave to address it directly. And as I said last night when another young person got up to talk about mental health, I'm frustrated that we still have to say that you're brave for standing up and talking about struggles with mental health or issues that so many of us are facing, but there still are stigmas around mental health. And the more we talk about it, the more we share our stories, the more we address this like the medical challenge that it is, and the community challenge that we can solve, and the economic issue that we do need to address, the better off we'll be. On a personal level, I know what it's like to grow up in a family with someone suffering significant mental distress. And today I can say that I'm incredibly proud of the work my mom is doing, destigmatizing and promoting what needs to be done on mental health. And I am also incredibly proud that our health minister, Jane Philpott, understands and has made it a personal goal of hers that I share, that we are going to change the face of mental health in this country. And what is great to see is that we understand it's provincial jurisdiction on health. The provinces are there with us on this. They see how important it is to do, and that's why we've put forward $5 billion over the coming years directly towards mental health. And one of the things that we know and we can recognize is that providing support for young people who are struggling with mental illness is one of the best ways of dealing with the impacts of this in our society and our communities. Most people suffering from mental illnesses exhibit symptoms while they are still young, and if we can give them the real support, the present counseling, the kind of engagement that they need when they need it, we are setting a path for success for so many people who deserve every chance at success. So it's something I'm absolutely committed to. It's something we are working very, very hard on, and it's something that I am committed to delivering for you and for all of our young people. Thank you. Okay, we're going to go up to the back corner there. Someone with a question there. Way up there in the corner. There we go. We'll give the person with the mic a little bit of a run there. Yeah. That young woman who's standing there.
Thank you, microphone runner. Thank you for taking my question.
You're very welcome.
In the 2015 election, I became aware of severe disenfranchisement in regards to voting that many Canadians do not realize is happening. When I went to register to vote while I was living in America, I found that I was not allowed to vote due to rules put in place by the Harper administration. This also affected my family, who, my dad here, continued to pay taxes in Canada while we were in America. During the campaign, you promised to return voting rights to Canadians abroad. Do you still intend to restore these rights, and what progress has been made in that regard?
Thank you very much for the question, and it's a great question. We know, and we should be very, very proud of the over 3 million Canadians who live and work overseas, representing us in many different ways, demonstrating that Canadians are engaged in the world, global citizens, and still very, very proud of the maple leaf of their home and wanting to participate in our elections. That's why we fixed it. The Minister of Democratic Institutions, just before Christmas, put forward the first series of changes to the Unfair Elections Act that the previous government had brought in. And part of that features an initiative that still has to go through the House, but will be in place in time for the next election, that says anyone living outside this country, regardless of how long they are living outside this country, will be able to vote in the riding that their last official residence in Canada was. So wherever the last place you lived before leaving Canada is, that's where you're going to get to vote. And that's the solution we found and put forward. So I love questions that I have an answer to. Thank you very much. Going to the next section there. Here we go. Yes, you on your feet there in the back.
I'm coming to you.
Because now the runners are going to move to the top of the stairs. So I'm going to start picking people at the bottom. There we go.
Mr. Prime Minister, it's an honor to see you for the fourth time, actually. The first two times I saw you were at Fanshawe. The last time when you visited Fanshawe in the spring, and when you visited Fanshawe before the election, the time before that was at We Day in Toronto. So thank you for coming here this evening. My question is in regards to finding employment. I just recently graduated from Fanshawe College and am currently studying social justice and peace studies at King's. I am also a person who identifies as being differently abled. I'm just wondering what your plan is to help Canadians who are differently abled to find jobs.
Thank you very much for your question. Thank you for being here tonight, and it's great to see you again. One of the things that we know for a country like Canada, which is relatively small in the scale of the global economy, we need to give everyone an opportunity to contribute, a real and fair chance to succeed. And that means making sure that regardless of your levels of ability, regardless of your background, regardless of where you're from, you need to be able to access the tools to unlock your potential. We have asked the extraordinary Carla Qualtrough, our Minister of Sport and Persons with Disabilities, to put together a comprehensive Accessibility Act, something that will look at how Canada makes sure that as a country, as communities, success is accessible for everyone, regardless of challenges, of disabilities, of particularities. She is right now engaged in consultations across the country with a tremendous number of people to really put forward a frame that goes to the heart of who we are, which is a fair country, a country that recognizes that everyone needs a shot to succeed. And sometimes people need a little extra help, a little boost on this, or a little more attention to some of the barriers and challenges that most of us don't even see because we take our abilities for granted. And at the same time, I need to thank those of you who are strong enough and present enough to stand up and remind all of us of the things we take for granted and how important it is that we draw on your strength and everyone of different abilities, strengths to succeed. And we're moving forward, and hopefully we will have the Canadian Accessibility Act in place within the coming year. Thank you very much. Okay, next section, someone down on the bottom. You, ma'am, with the striped poncho pom-pom there. Here we go. Here we go. So pass the hot dog in the stadium thing.
Thank you. Mr. Prime Minister, I greatly admire President Barack Obama. And what I really... What I really admire about him is, as he's finishing up his 8 years in office, he's had no controversy. And...
Wow, very generous of you. Okay,
no,
we'll run with that.
He hasn't had any personal conflicts. He's really been very in integrity. So I'm really get annoyed and frustrated when I read the paper about the whole thing about, you know, your family taking the helicopter, the private parties where people pay a lot of money to spend time with you, and they're supposedly not supposed to talk about what their personal interests are, which doesn't really make sense to me because I'm sure that they must. But what I'm trying to say is that when you came into power, I felt as if there was some fresh air, and I thought, wow, this young man is going to be like Obama. He's going to be really stand in integrity. He's going to be above reproach. And yet here we are with this conflict of interest stuff. And I thought, too, that when you chose all your cabinet members that you're asking of them to be really above board. But we're still, you know, here you've had some challenges in that area. And I really invite you as you go forward to really not get involved with anything that's going to taint you in that way. You can rise higher than that.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your concern and for your questions. One of the things that I take very, very seriously is the trust of Canadians. I think how we engage, how we conduct ourselves, how we demonstrate that our focus as a government is on the well-being and the opportunities and the benefit of Canadians comes through in everything we should come through in everything we do. I have a very high standard for myself and for my team, and we will continue to demonstrate the kind of openness and transparency that people need. I think on your reference to fundraising, I think people need to be reminded that at the federal level, we have some of the most stringent rules on fundraising of anywhere across the country. We cannot, there are serious limits, strict limits on personal donations. You can't accept union or business corporate donations. And there is absolute transparency about who donates, and everything is always very, very clear and public on that. Because we need to have confidence in our governments, and that's certainly something that I'm committed to and will continue to be. But thank you very much for your concern. Appreciate that. Someone from down here. You, ma'am. Yeah.
Hi, it's great.
Go ahead.
Hello. Okay, awesome. I'm Dina, and I'm actually on Peter Bregiscato's Youth Council. So thanks again for creating many opportunities for youth, your Prime Minister's Youth Council as well. So Canada is heading into its 150th year, which is awesome. Now, youth are our current and our future. We're not just the future, but we're here, we're now, we're ready to make change. How do you see our role as youth, as young adults, for now, for Canada, as we turn 150, for the country, for the world?
Well, listen, thank you for your engagement. Thank you for your interest. The fact is, getting young people involved in politics was an essential part of my path through politics. I was youth critic for the Liberal Party for many years before getting into moving towards the leadership. Before that, I was a teacher. I was a youth advocate. I was an activist on environmental issues. I've always been able to draw on young people because, for me, young people do something really important extremely well, and that is think about the long term. Think about challenging the status quo and accept that we might have to make significant changes as we move forward, and they're ready to think about the future as being significantly different from the present. Once you get stuck in the mortgages and the orthodontic bills and the putting aside money for retirement, you start to think, despite yourself, of the future as a little bit more linear. Whereas a young person who's going from high school to university, from university to their first job, to starting a family and buying a home, their lives are about total transformations. And our ability to draw those young people into how we think about how we govern ourselves, how we make decisions for the future, understanding the need to think about the long term, to challenge assumptions, to ask ourselves, well, just because it's always been done this way, does it need to be continually done this way? That's why bringing youth into the conversation was so important for me. It wasn't just about getting a few more young people out to vote. It was about changing the kinds of conversations that were had. And that's why we were so happy, all of us, in politics, to see so many young people getting involved. That's why all political parties now realize that you have to activate and engage with youth in an authentic and real way, and why we're seeing so many great young people continue to get involved. And I'm so glad to see so many young people out here tonight. The way we draw in diverse voices, young people, people hard at work in their careers, people who are in retirement, people from every different background, is the way we ensure that the solutions we put forward are truly reflective of the very best that we can do. And that, for me, is at the center of something that we do very, very well in this country, which is understand that diversity is and always will be a source of strength for Canada and not a source for weakness. So bringing in young voices and elders, bringing in people of all different backgrounds, this is how you build a strong society, not by marginalizing voices that might challenge you or might disagree with you or might push you in one way or another. That's why I'm so passionate about making sure that young people have a seat at the table and are part of shaping our future. Thank you very much. All right, questions from the back. Let's go, you in the blue sweater there, sir. Yes.
Welcome to London. I'm really, really proud to be here with fellow Canadians, Londoners, and you being here just is a reflection of how committed you are to staying connected with Canadians. So this is more of a concern, what I'm going to say, and it's about how we're expanding our partnerships globally, getting investment into Canada, trying to get people to buy our goods, to buy our services, and how that connects back to the values that we have as Canadians, more specifically human rights, international law. I would like to see those values reflected in our relationships, and we do business with some countries that are not exactly enthusiastic about human rights or international law. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, and it's a really important question because what we always have to ask as a country is how do we engage with people who we disagree with on larger or smaller things? I mean, there is a school of thought that says, until someone behaves as well as Canada in every possible way, we shouldn't reward them by engaging with them. We should just sit back and wait until they change and improve. Obviously, that's an extreme position. Where most of us sit is to say, okay, we need to be thoughtful about how we engage in a way that is in our interest, but also encourages positive changes within the country and the society that we're engaging with. How can we influence positive outcomes by our international engagement, by our commercial partnerships, by the diplomatic and development aid that we have to offer? How can we be a positive influence on the situation in the world? And there's always nuances and questions we have to challenge. And I think I can't be here in London and hear your question without thinking of the issue of the General Dynamics contract. The fact that there are thousands of jobs, families here in London who depend on that industry and are benefiting from a contract that was signed by a previous government. Now, the NDP member, local member, and the Conservatives and the Liberals were all unequivocal on that issue, that you cannot cancel a contract that was signed by a previous government. If every time a government changed, all the contracts we signed internationally were suddenly in question, you'd rapidly find that nobody would take Canada's word on anything internationally anymore, and you simply can't do that, but everyone understands that. What we committed to and what we are serious about is ensuring that as we move forward, the level of openness, of transparency, of accountability, to make sure that any deals or contracts we engage in are consistent with our values, with our laws, with our principles, is the commitment we made to Canadians and, quite frankly, what people expect. We need to both make sure that we have good jobs in Canada, but we need to make sure we're also standing by our values and promoting them in the world. And that's exactly what I'm going to continue to do. Thank you very much. You in the white, right in the middle there. Yes. It's okay. It's on.
It's on?
Yeah.
Okay. So I find that a lot of the time, climate change is a topic that's underrepresented. And I was wondering, what are some long-term solutions that you do to help climate change? Thank you.
Oh, thank you for your question. Over the past decades, many different governments of different stripes have put forward climate change emissions reduction targets in this country. However, governments, including governments of my own stripe, have put forward ambitious targets and not put forward any concrete plan to actually achieve those reductions, because it's going to require shifts and changes and new ways of doing things, and it's a bit of a challenge. Well, we were very clear in the election campaign and have been clear since then that climate change is real and requires action. It is a significant and serious challenge that we have to face as a country and as a world. But we also recognize that it represents an opportunity. That if we start making that shift well, responsibly, we draw on the best and the brightest in this country, we invest in research, we invest in renewables, we invest in the transition we need to make off fossil fuels, then we can actually be ahead of the curve in terms of where the world is going in terms of dealing with climate change. That's why what we did was we brought the provinces together and we signed a pan-Canadian framework on climate change that involves real actions taken right across the country to reduce our emissions in a meaningful way. We will hit our Paris reduction commitment targets by 2030. We will do that in part by ensuring that there is a price put on carbon pollution across the country. Now, we recognize that different jurisdictions will have different ways of doing that, and that's just fine. We just need to make sure that they're equivalent and similar in their stringency. What that means is everyone needs to be part of it. Everyone needs to come together and make the changes we need. But we have to make sure we are not penalizing the most vulnerable, people for whom already the cost of living is too high. That's why all the money collected from the various approaches to carbon pricing will remain in the provinces that generated that revenue, so that we can make sure that we're helping the most vulnerable, the people who need it, the industries that need a little boost, whatever the province decides is the right way to help people out. We know it's time for real, concrete climate action, and that only happens when we recognize that you can't make a choice between what's good for the environment and what's good for the economy, but you have to be thoughtful about both of them together at the same time. I'm not the only one. The previous Prime Minister also has recognized that we need to phase out our dependence on fossil fuels. We need to move beyond fossil fuels, and the way to do that is to be smart about how we draw on our resources, how we extract them cleaner than anyone else in the world, and we continue to demonstrate responsibility in how we get them to markets. It's a big, complex question, but there are tremendous solutions that are in the works, that are being worked on, that Canada is leading on, and we can be proud that we can show the way to build a strong economy and protect the environment for decades to come in a way that the world will recognize. Thank you very much. Question from the back. Where are we pointing there? Okay. Okay, you with the waving hands. There we go. It better be a good one, because you've had your hand up the entire time I've been in here. There you go. Yes, you.
Oh. Thank you. First of all, Prime Minister Trudeau, welcome to London. Hello.
Good to be here. Thank you.
All right. My question is towards education. Now, I know you are an educator yourself. You're a family man. You are the leader of this great country. And I am wondering, what exactly is your plan to actually radically change and improve on the educational system that is being run currently throughout not only London and Ontario, but throughout all of Canada? Because we are a proud country, but I believe that that pride has to be taught, but as well that it has to be educated. People have to have the building blocks in order to grow and become the best they can be. And I feel at times, throughout my entire life here in Canada, I've lived here for more than 10 years, I feel that there's been challenges. I've been thrown challenges my way. I've seen people go through many hurdles, seen people go through many problems through disability, mental health, and a lot of problems throughout their growth. And I'm wondering, what will you do to radically change the mindset of these overly standardized tests, this pressure and stigma in trying to move people into trying to act in a certain way, trying to move in a certain way, answer in a certain way?
Thank you very much. Obviously, as a teacher who was known for challenging his students and always trying to bring out the very best in various ways, I take your question very much to heart. However, as a federal government, very respectful of the fact that education is a provincial jurisdiction, I do know that there are benefits to having the provinces be able to determine what path forward is best for them. Not only does it allow a better range of ability to address particular problems in particular regions of the country, but it allows provinces to compete against each other for the best and brightest and learn from each other's successes and failures. We know that education is an essential tool for the success of this country. And when I am traveling internationally, talking about the Canadian competitive advantage, talking about why investing in Canada, growing manufacturing jobs in Canada, creating opportunities to bring new investments and new jobs to Canada, my first and biggest pitch on that is you. is all of you, is Canadians ourselves, educated, hardworking, driven to succeed, willing to take on new challenges, and always willing to learn and grow. This is the great advantage that Canada has compared to just about every other jurisdiction in the world. We have an incredible population that is representative of the entire world and ready to roll up their sleeves and build a brighter future for themselves and their community. We need to make sure we are giving, and I agree with you on this, Canadians the tools to be successful in the 21st century. And that's why I do point to Ontario as a tremendous source of success. Do you know Ontario graduates more people in the STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and math, than the entire state of California? The number one place to recruit grads for Silicon Valley is University of Waterloo. The kinds of research and innovation done right here at Western makes this community world-class in terms of robotics, in terms of investments to make that are going to shape the economies of the future. We need to continue to invest in education, and I have been encouraging, in my respectful of provincial jurisdictions way, provinces to push more teaching to code at K to 12 levels, because we know that being powerful users of technology is going to be essential for whatever careers, because we know young people are tending to have 4 or 5 different careers at least in the course of their lives. But being able to code, being able to be powerful users of technology is going to be essential going forward. So education is the building block for our country's success, which is why we have made significant changes to the Canada Student Grants Program, increasing by 50% the amount for lower and middle income students, and preventing you from having to pay back any of your student loans until you're making at least $25,000 a year. These are things that make schooling more accessible and our country more successful. Okay, question to you in the black hat back there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. And I apologize if I get a little emotional during this, but in July I retired from the Canadian Forces because I was injured in Afghanistan. And no. Over the last 6 months, I've had a really rough time. And that rough time was because none of my pensions were coming in on time. I had to rely on my father, friends and family, and friends who themselves were injured in Afghanistan as well, just to get by, just to buy groceries. And this is unacceptable. The second thing is, too, the person who retired to help me was my father. And there's obviously the family caretaker's allowance, I'm sure you're aware of. I was denied that. My father's there every day for me when I wake up in the morning to give me my medications, to help take care of me in every way and in personal ways a father doesn't need to for a 30-year-old. And I want to stress the urgency of that needing to be fixed, because 6 months is ridiculous. I'm lucky to have an amazing member of Parliament, Peter Fregascatos, who was there for me like my first year at university, but this issue needs to be taken care of, and I have to stress on you, like, it's been hard, and it's been hard for not just me, but for all the other veterans who have retired too, including friends that I'm here with today. So.
Thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your continued service to your country and pointing out things we are not doing well enough. As a country, we have a sacred obligation that if we are going to send our young men and women into harm's way, we need to promise that we're going to care for them when they come home injured. We're going to support their families. This is something that we are committed to, and it's something we are working very, very hard on. We have made significant improvements on the system that we inherited when we formed government, but we haven't done enough yet, and I'm the first to recognize that. We have more to do, and we will continue to work, and I thank you for talking to Peter, and Peter certainly brings those issues forwards to our minister, and we're going to be working on your file and on the files of veterans across the country, because as we think of celebrating this country, this 150th anniversary, there's a lot of things to celebrate. But one of the blips that are on some people's radars, but not everyone's radars, will happen this April, when during a year of celebration of 150 years since Confederation, a whole bunch of us will be marking 100 years since Canada actually, really became a country. See, it didn't happen when a bunch of older white guys signed a paper in 1867. It happened when the very best of our young men came together at a place called Vimy Ridge and showed the world what Canada was capable of when we fought side by side. Canada's history is one of stepping up on the trenches of World War I and the beaches of World War II. We continue to step up around the world, soon possibly as peacekeepers once again. And any time a government is choosing to demonstrate the valor, the courage, and the values of Canadians by putting our very best forward to help in the world, we need to stand by the solemn commitment to take care of them when they come home. And I give you my pledge that we will work to do much better than we are right now. Thank you. Okay. Other question? You, the redhead. There you go. Yes. Yes, you.
Hello, Mr. Prime Minister. Thank you for taking my question. What I'd like to ask you is, excuse my phone unlocks. What is your administration doing currently and planning to do to combat the mental health crisis ongoing with Indigenous youth? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. It seems like, every week there are more news of young people taking their lives. News, get your minds out of the gutter, people. There is more tragic news of young people taking their lives, suffering from addiction problems, neglect, abuse in Indigenous communities around this country. We have tackled this problem by investing more money in crisis teams that can go to places that are going through these challenges. We're investing in more mental health supports. There's no question about it. But there's more to do than just respond to the emergencies. We have to look at the underlying causes. And so much of it has to do with the fact that young Indigenous people don't feel like they have the same opportunities that non-Indigenous Canadians have. And until we start investing properly in education, so that the same amount is invested in Indigenous community, in Indigenous students as is invested in non-Indigenous students, until we make sure that there are job opportunities and a future that young people in Indigenous communities can imagine and achieve, we're going to be a long way from that. And one further element that I will talk with you afterwards. How's that? Thank you. One of the other issues that we've seen regularly, and it's amazing, in communities that do a better job and are able to teach language and culture and identity, we see suicide rates and mental illness rates vastly lower than in Indigenous communities that have suffered and lost senses of identity. The commitments that we're making to invest in Indigenous language teaching, in cultural support, in programs that get young people back onto the land to discover their own heritage that was attempted to be erased by generations of residential schools, by restoring that sense of pride and self and who they are and the value they have to themselves, to the community, to the country, is a big piece of how we're going to address the mental health challenges that continue to happen in Indigenous communities and need to stop if we are going to be the country that I know we all want ourselves to be. Thank you very much. And Chief, thank you for being here. I look forward to chatting with you immediately afterwards. You, question. Yes, you've been very patient, sir.
Hi, how you?
Yeah, it's on.
I am Ammar from Syria, refugee. Thank you, Canada. Thank you, Canada, Monsieur Trudeau. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, but I can take the credit for it. If you and 35,000 Syrian refugees are here today, came in the past year, it's not because the government said, okay, let's make that happen and ticked a box somewhere. It's because Canadians, like the people in this room, stepped up. In your communities, your municipalities, your provinces, people said, you know what, at a time where the world is starting to close its doors on refugees, Canada should open ours. We need to do more because we have understood that people coming to this country with nothing but a desire to work hard and build a better future for themselves and for their kids is what has made this country extraordinary. And you and your families and your community as Canadians will continue to demonstrate that this country continues to grow because of the amazing diversity of people who come here, who believe in it, who share our vision of a better world. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to remind ourselves of who we are. Thank you. Question from the back corner now. Okay, way in the back there. There you go. Yes, you with the, you look like you're wearing a Harvard sweatshirt. Is that it? No, you just turned around. It's not a Harvard. Yes, you, whatever that is. What is it? Is that a Mustangs? I can't even, I'm getting old here. There we are.
Hi, Mr. Prime Minister. It's a Western sweatshirt.
I know, it is. But you guys know as well as I do, Western is the Harvard of Canada. I'm going to get nasty letters from my alma mater for that, but go ahead.
So my question to you is sort of a personal one, almost. To think about it, you're sort of the first prime minister that I've grown up with, ever since I've gotten sort of more of an awareness of politics. And my question to you is, what advice would you give to someone looking to pursue politics in the future as a career?
Oh, great question. I once had a conversation with my dad, pretty much along the same lines. He was ill. He was, maybe he had a year left to live, and I suddenly realized that even though I had been denying it left, right, and center all my life, there was at least a possibility that me, even though I was 27 at the time, one day, much later in life, maybe in my 50s or 60s, I might go into politics. And if I did, my father would not be around anymore to ask his advice. So, I've had great conversations with my father all my life. And I decided, well, here's an opportunity for me to sit down and ask this successful former prime minister who knew a lot about Canada and a lot about politics what I need to know to become a politician and to become a good politician and a good leader. So I sat down with him and I said, Dad, I need to figure out from you what I need to know how to be a good politician if I ever choose to do this in my life. And we proceeded to have probably the most awkward conversation I've ever had with my dad. It was totally artificial, completely useless, where I was like, well, I mean, what happens if, the banks don't want you to do something, but you feel it's the right thing to do, but there's pressures in this? And he said, well, you think about the right kinds of things. But it just wasn't the level of conversation and learning that I'd always been able to get from my father. And we just sort of gave up after 15 minutes and said, okay, well, maybe I won't go into politics and we'll be fine. But looking back on it, I realized that what I needed to know about being a good politician or a good leader, my father had taught me all my life about being a good person. To be true to your values, to listen to others, to respect each other, and to understand that if you are lucky in your life, which I certainly am and certainly was all my life, to go to great schools, to travel the world, to meet amazing people, to have tremendous opportunities. But as we all are incredibly lucky, luckier than 99.5% of everybody on the planet, just because we're Canadian, that when we are lucky enough to have opportunities, we have to do right by those opportunities. And we define ourselves by how we have a positive impact on the world around us. And for me, my path into politics came from getting involved as a teacher, being a teacher, looking at how I could make an impact on the lives of my students every single day, month, year. I got into various types of activism, environmental activism, youth advocacy. I was a public speaker talking about engaged citizenship, and I ended up in politics. Yes, the name helped, but the name also posed a challenge for me because, it had given me a certain amount of a thick skin because I learned to deal with people who didn't know me but really didn't like me for reasons completely unrelated to anything or anyone that I personally was. But the same way I'd had to learn to put aside people who criticized me without founding, I had to learn to put aside people who thought I was great without founding just because they liked my father. And I had to get a strong sense of myself, my own capacities, what I do well, what I don't do well. And every step of the way, I looked at how I could have an impact in a way that was true to myself and following my own passions. So if you want to go into politics, maybe your path is to study poli-sci and go work for Peter or Kate and get involved and go through a political route, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's about going and becoming a great doctor, or a great lawyer, or a social worker, or a community activist, or whatever it is that you want to be passionate about. And as you evolve, and as you change, and as you improve, you discover new ways of challenging the system, of bringing changes about. And you create a network of people who realize that you are powerful in pulling people together and enabling them to make a change in your society. And as you look to become more and more engaged in your community and you follow on causes that matter to you and pull people together, suddenly you realize, without even knowing it, you're an active politician. And all you have to do is pick where to run, and you have a network and issues you're passionate about and a capacity to draw people together. And quite frankly, we need more people like you. We need more people who say, you know what, I've worked hard in my life, I've engaged with my community, I'm an expert in certain fields, I want to put myself in service of my community, of my province, of my country. And the more we can do to model politics that are inclusive and respectful and focused on serving one's community and one's world, the better off we'll all be. So I hope that you follow your passions and those passions lead you to shaping the world for the better. Merci beaucoup. And unfortunately, we only have time for one last question. And it's from this section here and you waving at me there. How you go? There you go. Yeah, no, down here, this woman right here.
Thank you very much. In response to a couple of other questions, you mentioned diversity and accessibility. I have been blessed with deaf siblings, and by no fault of our own, we're sitting in seats that were reserved for deaf attendees. And I understand the logistics of this event were changing constantly. We received emails for those of us who had RSVP'd that we were going to be here tonight. However, for the deaf people who had RSVP'd, there was no mention in that email that the RSVP process had been abandoned. We have two very talented professional interpreters here for the deaf. They were not allowed to go out and let the deaf know what was going on, nor were they allowed to go out and bring the deaf into the seats that were reserved for them. So we are not practicing what we preach right here.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. I'm sorry about that, and I pledge that we'll do better next time. I know that doesn't necessarily help you in this situation, but in my last, in some of my previous town halls, I noticed American Sign Language interpreters going on, and it was great. But as you mentioned today, we had a team chasing around venues because, who knew that Londoners were so amazingly engaged in politics and would come out in such huge numbers. So I apologize, and we will certainly endeavor to do much better next time. Thank you for bringing that up to me. Merci beaucoup, tout le monde. Thank you very much for all your questions, all your participation tonight. Thank you very much.